Bill Finch, what about the
Um,
cities? And when you were head of the climate and task force, the climate and jobs task force for all the U.S. mayors across the country, um, didn't you do something to try to globalize that? Didn't you work with cities from other countries as well?
Yeah, I have to say the U.S. Conference of Mayors has been in the lead on this since day one. I mean, the mayor's climate protection pledge that they took starting in 2005, I think it was first announced in 2007, had 1,100 mayors sign on to this, led by Greg Nichols, the famous mayor of Seattle, who got it all started. Um, you know, mayors have so much that they can do, and Mike Bloomberg's working with the 60 largest cities, but they used to say about Bridgeport that after vaudeville, everything's Bridgeport, right? After New York City, everything's Bridgeport. There's thousands of cities like Bridgeport around the world, and our carbon impact and the impact on the environment from within our boundaries is great. And no one can act as quickly as mayors can. Sometimes they don't have as many resources, but they have a lot of resources, and they also are generally not running against each other. So they like to steal each other's ideas and replicate quickly. So I think one of the messages I have on this show, Toby, as in answer to your question, is we have underutilized mayors. Mayors have been the first responders on climate since day one, and there's so much they can do. And we looked just at Bridgeport and what we did. ICLEI studied our climate impact of the city's activities. It was only 4% of the overall total. So when we did our Be Green 2020 sustainability plan, which I would urge every city to do and just replicate what Bridgeport and New York City did with Plan YC and Be Green 2020, we found that we had to get the business community involved. So we formed a partnership with the Chamber of Commerce, which was, everybody thinks the Chamber is your enemy. The Chamber is not your enemy because they see jobs and reduced expenses and greater efficiencies in the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions. So we raised several $100,000 over several years, augmented the city staff, created a sustainability director, and had a plan of action of 65 policies, which we implemented all of them. Actually, we didn't implement one. That's another story. But we reduced the greenhouse gas emissions within the city of Bridgeport's boundaries, this is pretty amazing, by 5%. We had the equivalent of 20,000 homes on renewable energy. That's a significant percentage of Bridgeport's number of homes. So if Bridgeport can do it, any city could do it, because we're a broke city in the Northeast with lots of challenges. But we created about $1 billion, over $1 billion of investment in 8 years. The thing that I like to focus on is a triple bottom line. We shouldn't do anything that doesn't reduce the city's expense, create jobs in the inner city, jobs that can't be exported overseas, and reduce our impact on the climate with greenhouse gas emissions. So if you do a policy that has all of those, everybody, what did Kennedy say, that success has got 1 million fathers and failure is an orphan? You have a lot of fathers who want to take credit for what you can do.
Great. Ab?
Yeah, I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit more about those partnerships that you created with businesses, because I think often we see business, we as in progressive organizations, progressive organizers, and activists do see business as a threat to the progress that we can make on climate change, on environmental justice, right? And there is a real concern as well about how did we get started here, and a lot of activists would say it is because of business practices. It is because of environmental racism. So I'd love to hear, how you address that, how you worked with businesses.
Well, on the last point you made about environmental racism, which is clearly the case, we had our environmental justice community front and center in our whole planning of the sustainability plan. So we didn't do anything that didn't impact the quality of life. And one thing that mayors can do is they can talk turkey, right? They don't go in and talk about penguins and polar bears and degrees Celsius and Fahrenheit. They go in and say, Aunt Millie's basement is flooding. Joe doesn't have a job. My son's got asthma. We relate it to people where they're at and what their conditions that they're living under are. And by doing that, we reach the hearts of people and the minds of people. We had 100 kids out every summer in something called the Mayor's Conservation Corps. They taught people how to recycle. They taught people how to work with Posigen to get solar on their roof. We taught people how to use the buses. We taught every green practice you can imagine with kids from the community, providing them a summer job. How to get a free tree from the city for your yard so we can sequester carbon. I believe that mayors can do a tremendous amount, and they just need to. I think one of the faults of the environmental community worldwide is they haven't reached out to mayors enough. I think Bloomberg's doing a great job with his C40. I just said 60 before, it's C40. But beyond the 40 largest cities, what I was explaining with Natalie earlier when we spoke was every time a mayor finds a better way to lend a library book or fill a pothole or create affordable housing or create jobs in the inner city, they're fighting climate change, because the more dense we live, the shorter the distance to transport ourselves to work, our sewage to the treatment center, our electrons to our cell phone. All those distances require less energy, which means they require less greenhouse gas emissions. So a huge amount of conservation is making cities work, and to expand the number of people that live close to one another. Now, COVID has given us some challenges in that regard, but
Right.
I think it's also showed us how interdependent we are in each other.